don't know why I always record it. I always record to the cloud, but I guess I could just record to the computer too. I then download it and then upload it to the Yeshiva um, page. Okay, so shalom. Let's start. I'm going to do a share screen here. Let me see what we have. Share. Let me just start with that one for a second and switch to that. Does anyone see that? Not yet, huh?
Yeah.
Not yet. Not yet. Okay, now. Okay. So we were working on this. I just want to because some people weren't here, I want to bring in the Radak sort of as an intro to the whole episode. He takes a right on the first verse, just like last week we looked together at last week at Rabbeinu Bachya. Let's look at the Radak for a second and see how he struggles with this. He struggles with this, and he goes long, and that sort of will bring us all up um, to the struggles that we're asking. And then tonight, I want to work on what I'm calling the elasticity of Parshanut, even when you do Pshat. And that relates to Pasuk Hey, verse 5. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so here's the Radak, also a medieval scholar. It is in order to ask in what fashion the serpent conversed with Chava, just like Sadyagon and the Ibn Ezra asked, if God had opened the serpent's mouth by means of a miracle, as he did when Bilam's ass started speaking to him, why did the Torah not report, as it did in that verse, God opened the mouth of the serpent? If, on the other hand, as in the view of Rab Sadia Gaon, the conversations reported in the Torah between both the ass and Bilam and the serpent and Chava were conducted by an angel, then what sin did the serpent do? Why was the serpent punished and cursed for all times? Question. Besides, how is it possible that Hashem assigned to an angel the task to seduce Chava, to sin against God? Another question. Furthermore, what reason was there to introduce the serpent into this story at this point? Why did the Torah have to write, and the serpent was the smartest of all the beasts of the field? If the serpent was unable to speak, to communicate with Chava on his own right, how do we know that it was such a clever creature? So these are all, we're struggling with the pshat. If we are to assume that the angel was dispatched to subject the woman to a test of her faith and obedience, how was the serpent to blame for the outcome? Besides, it would have been so much more appropriate for the angel to test Adam himself, seeing it was he who had been commanded directly by God not to eat from the tree of knowledge. Chava had heard of this only secondhand from her husband. The whole subject is extremely confusing when we look only at what has been revealed to us by the text. So he's using the term Kabbalist to include the Midrash, particularly. So Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer is a late Midrash, very late actually. So he's calling it Kabbalist. In that chapter's introduction, the point is made that jealousy and envy. So what are the themes? What are the moral issues? Why is the Torah telling us all of this? Some of the most destructive character traits exist also in the celestial regions. And that when the angels who had not been delighted at man's creation in the first place saw how clever Adam was and how he had named the animals immediately upon looking at them, they became afraid of their dominant role in God's entourage would be jeopardized now. Slight twist of what we've been talking about. They therefore schemed to seduce man into sinning against his creator in order to safeguard their role as being closest to God. Thereupon, Samael, so that's an angel that's sort of the Satan, the most powerful angel, the one who had 12 wings, whereas all the others had 6 wings, took his underlings with him to take a closer look at what went on in the terrestrial regions. He found that in most of those regions, the serpent was by far the most intelligent of the beasts, and he could not find another beast as capable and willing to fall in with his wicked plans. we are informed. This is Midrash now. This is a Midrash that the Rambam actually quotes too. That the serpent was huge and looked like a camel, and Samael was riding on it. The sages, with their insight into the then hidden aspects of the Torah, wanted to illustrate how God sometimes amuses himself to make playful use both of the camel and its rider, the serpent and the Satan, Samael. Another comment, so he's taking us into Midrash, to Chazal, to the sages, is that the serpent had engaged in sexual relations with Chava. This is something that several of you mentioned that we read. It left behind within her some of the spiritual poisonous residue which had contaminated her personality. This was so perverse that until the Jewish people accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai, they had not been able to totally cleanse themselves of that poison. So there's a continuity or a continuum of a theme here. The other nations of the world never cleanse themselves of this spiritual poisonous material. Students of such mystical aspects of the Torah will understand what I refer to, but I have no intention to use my commentary to dwell on such matters, having been warned by my teachers not to reveal what the Torah clearly had not seen fit to reveal to one and all. We will relate to such allusions only in the same way as the sages have seen fit to do themselves. Hopefully, those who are attuned will understand what the sages had in mind to convey to us. Okay, anybody have any comments at this point? Anything? Okay, he goes on.
Well,
some comment. Yeah, Marty?
well, this is pretty funny because you suggested reading more on Nevuchim, and so I did. And uh, that's what Rambam talks about too. He can't reveal the secrets. So
Right.
are you going to reveal the secrets to us today?
So we're gonna good one, Marty. You know, I'm probably the last one to know the secrets, perhaps. So next week, Marty, we're gonna look at the Rambam. So while we have the Rambam in our thoughts, it's also in Chelek Aleph, second section, 2. And that's where we'll start. And you were looking at section 230, right? Yeah, yeah. And there's also section 2, I think it's 33. So we'll try to do this next week. Okay, good. Thanks for that.
Wanted to
So
ask,
here, yeah.
besides the Zohar that talks about the snake and Chava, do any of the Pashtanim talk about it?
So we'll see what we come up with our list here tonight. But it seems like this was it? I want to just re-ask the question: was it a theme in Chazal? Because once it's a theme in Chazal, we're going to see a Rashi tonight that sort of says, there's lots of midrashim, and I'm only going to come to take those midrashim that can relate to the pshat. So that's a good question, and please keep it open. Thanks. So where were we? Some commentators cited by the Ibn Ezra say that the serpent did not speak at all. They just struggling with this idea that all of a sudden, a snake would speak, but managed to convey its meaning to Chava by hissing, whistling. Chava was clever enough, according to that view, to understand what the serpent was trying to communicate to her. It seems very far-fetched. Look how he's struggling. Very far-fetched to credit Chava with understanding what the serpent tried to hint to her in such a fashion. It is even more far-fetched to credit the serpent with understanding what Chava answered her in Hebrew. The scholar, so, here we are, we're into our 6th class, and here we're still asking questions. The scholar, Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra, writes that the serpent did indeed speak, and it used to walk. Here's his pshat, just like the man. And why does he say that? Because the Torah says that. Originally, God had equipped the serpent with superior knowledge and intelligence. That's what the first pasuk says, right? The Nachash was the smartest of the animals, more crafty than any of the beasts of the field. But here he's adding not as crafty as man, which is a little different than the way we read it, because we did a sort of an allegorical approach when we learned this through Rav Sharki. This was also the opinion of our sages. This is why they write, at the time God punished the serpent, he said to him, here I had made you so that you were king of all the beasts, some things that you had not been satisfied with. I enabled you to walk upright, just like man. You were not satisfied with this either. Now you will have to crawl on your belly and eat dust. So there's a midah keneged midah here. We must ask ourselves that if all this is so, why the Torah had not mentioned that the serpent had enjoyed such distinctions, that the Torah report of God's creative activities makes no mention of this, as it did in Genesis 1:6, when man's distinction over all the other creatures in Perek Aleph is introduced by God saying, we will make him in our image. Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu. Furthermore, when God cursed the serpent, mention is meant of it having to crawl and having to eat dust. Why did the Torah not also mention that God deprived it of its superior intellect? So he's still struggling. Here we are 3/4 into the way of this. This would have been the most severe part of the punishment, and the Torah does not mention it at all. The most likely answer to all the points that we have raised is that the serpent was enabled miraculously on that occasion to speak in a voice and language. Chava could understand, even though the Torah did not write specifically that God opened his mouth, as it did in connection with Bilam, seeing that this represented something far more extraordinary. Because Bilam's ass, which occurred in a world that was post-Gan Eden, as opposed to, so this is the editor here, I guess. Bilam's ass, which occurred in a world that was post-Gan Eden, as opposed to an idyllic world where such miracles were not out of the ordinary. Besides, Bilam's ass had saved her master from death by opening her mouth, whereas the serpent speaking had led to Chava and her husband's eventual death. Still, the question remains why the serpent was punished. Definitely hasn't answered that if God himself created the miracle that put these words in his mouth. We need to answer that the serpent had already planned its craftiness, how to set a trap for man to discredit it in the eyes of God, so that it could replace man as the superior creature on earth. So where is he heading with this, guys? He's heading with this, that God can be an enabler for good or for bad. Is that where he's heading? God was aware of all of this, and all he did was to follow the principle, ba letamei potchim lo. If someone is bent on defiling something, one facilitates this for him. Very difficult concept. We often say that, if that a person is led to where he wants to be led, but this is a little harsher than that. Furthermore, God had to make sure that Adam knew that the serpent had been punished for good cause. So, Haya Arum, clever. I'm skipping the editor here. The editor critiques Haya Arum, clever. Seeing that, so now he's talking about the meaning of the word himself. I just wanted to do this as an intro for people that missed a few weeks. But here, let's just read it since we're here already. Seeing that the word refers to intelligence, it is spelled with the vowel shuruk. So we have two words here. We have arum and we have arum as in chokhmah, and arum, which is nakedness, I guess. Okay, when the Torah wrote here, Haya Arum, it meant that the serpent possessed extraordinary powers of imagination, totally superior to other animals in this respect. Our sages generally describe the fox as crafty, able to scheme, something other animals are not credited with doing. This is not the same as possessing didactic intelligence, something reserved for man. When the Torah adds the words Mikol Chayat HaSadeh, all the beasts of the field, it excludes the domestic animals as not possessing even a modicum of such powers of imagination. The behemoth. The serpent at this time was superior to the fox in its ability to scheme. Asher asa Hashem Elohim, even though all these creatures have been constructed out of the same raw material. God had given added an advantage to different ones of these creatures. Some had been granted greater physical prowess, others greater power to scheme. So now he goes on, it's a little misogynistic. Why did he pick the woman? He thought the woman was an easier target. All right, so we raised these questions. Let's ask the question, what do folks think of his choice of why the serpent is accountable for what he did, even though God enabled him? Any comments? All right, we can talk more about this after class when we stop the recording.
Wasn't the enabling a choice, like to give him free choice, meaning like something that you could choose not to be that, like unless the serpent was actually an angel, it seems like he was given the one-time chance to use his free choice, and he could have chosen not to, right?
Okay, good. But when we use the term enabled, right? Ba'aletame potchim lo, doesn't that imply that we're modulating that free choice? We're weighting it, we're influencing it. Yeah. So we're very comfortable with the idea when I want to do good, that comes into play. When I want to do good, the whole cosmos helps us. Hashem helps us when I want to do good. All right, think about that. So now I want to go down now to the pasuk of tonight. When the Nachash says to the woman, no, you're not going to die. And now we're on, 5. Let me get some English here too. What that happened? Jumped away here. So the Nachash is speaking, and he says, Ki yodea Elokim, Ki, for Hashem knows, right? Ki biyom acholchem mimenu, when you eat from the tree, the day you eat from the tree, v'nifkechu anechem, you'll get the knowledge, right? It's not vision, knowledge. V'item ke Elohim. It says, and you'll be like gods, Yodei tov v'ra. So my question, who can differentiate between good and evil? So we have one choice here. We have two choices, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. The Nachash is making an argument to the woman that not you will be like God, because we know we're not comfortable with that concept. No one could be like God, but you'll have the knowledge. This is what the Rambam will say next week, quoting Unklos. And what's the knowledge to do between good and evil? You're right, good and evil. So now I want to start this off by jumping to Rashi on this pasuk. So Rashi's basically quoting Midrash, but he's quoting it succinctly. He's like, not the whole context of the Midrash. Right? I don't know if we'll make it tonight, but we'll get to the Midrash. This is Midrash Rabbah. So what's going on? Ki yodea Elokim. Every artisan detests his fellow artisan. Two of a trade never agree. The serpent suggested to her, God ate of the tree and created the world. So if you can eat. So he really said something not only provocative, but attractive. That's a good argument. Okay? And now what is Rashi? Rashi, giving us pshat. Rashi, I'm going to show you in a few verses, says I'm only doing pshat here. Look at this next one. V'item kelohim, you will be as God, creators of worlds. So he's taking that, he's making a double pronged argument. There's two things that you could do here. You can be like God, and you could know the difference between Tov and Ra, because that's what happens when you're like God. So what do we do when we know that you can't be like God? Well, supposedly, okay, we could say that the Nachash lied. The Midrash isn't saying that. The Midrash is saying that's what you will become. So let's jump to Unklos for a second. Let's jump to Unklos for a second. And we have to do the Hebrew because the English translation was wrong. The English translation translated it like Rashi. So it's revealed before Hashem, Regale Kadam Hashem, Arei biyoma the techlun, on the day that you will die mine from it, v'yitpatchun enechem, and you'll have that opening of your knowledge, right? Opening of your eyes, meaning knowledge. Utehon kerav revin chakimin. He doesn't use the word God at all. You'll just be something superior. So the word Elohim could mean many things, including a court, right? Kirav revin chakimin ben tav lera. So the argument there was just that it's still a strong argument and a good argument and to be coaxed. But there's no claim that you'll be like God. There's no claim that you'll be like God. All right, let's see. Let's see who else we had on this pasuk now. So the Malbim, there's no English here. See, when our Ramban, who's often very, very long, goes short here because he's pretty much following the Midrash, Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and then we'll see it tonight, some very small disagreements with them. So here Ibn Ezra helps us too. Nobody's suggesting we'll be like gods. They're only suggesting you'll be something superior, like an angel. Okay. Any comments on that? So we see this wide spectrum of parshanut, of freedom of parshanut on how to read this pasuk. When I first read the Rashi, creator of worlds, before I went to the Midrash, I was taken aback. But that was the argument presented. So now let's go back to Rashi, and now let's go back. Oh man, it's 8:27 already. I wanted to do just half an hour and then talk. We'll go a little bit more. So let's go here. What did she see? What did she perceive when she said, Vatera Isha ki tov etz lamachal? Right? The woman saw that the tree was good for eating. What does that mean? V'chitavahu la'inayim, and there was something really drawing to her that she wanted, right? V'nechmada etz laskil. This is one we talked about last week, and the tree was desirable as a source of wisdom, the word lehaskil. So she's internalizing his argument. She's internalizing his argument. And so vatikach mipriyo v'tochal, she ate, and then she gave her husband. When we see the Midrash goes, I guess that'll be in 2 weeks, I guess, after we do the Rambam. So here's Rashi on this. And the woman saw, she approved the words of the servant. They pleased her and she believed him. That's what again, the word sight. The word sight is she accepted, she agreed. That's the word sight. Kitov, that the tree was good to make her become like God. So he's being consistent with his Rashi, with his previous approach to this from the Midrash. V'chitavahu la'inayim, and that it was a delight to the eyes. even as he had said to her, then your eyes shall be open. Okay, so we mentioned that the word ta'ava came in here last week. Rashi doesn't seem to key in on that. V'nechmad laskil, make one wise, even he had said to her, knowing good and evil. So he's saying she's internalizing his entire argument. And as far as Rashi is concerned, including the argument of literally being a higher being. And so now the flip side of this, why did she give it to her husband? So that she should not die and he remain alive to take another wife. So the midrash here, again surprises us. How does this even come into us? The word gam, right? Also to her husband may also be understood to include cattle and beasts. And that's also the midrash. Okay, now let's look at Ibn Ezra and Ramban on this. When the woman saw in her heart, right? That's Ibn Ezra. Again, internalizing the word, the saw. It's not sight through the eyes. And that the tree was to be desired. So he ignores this whole business of God, right? To be like God. He says because it had the power to make one wise and her eyes would open. Okay, the meaning of with her, when she said to her husband to eat with her, is that they ate together. That's his pshat, because it said they ate together. And that she disclosed to him the secret that the serpent had revealed to her. Adam thus did not sin unwittingly. Okay, he was not, and was therefore punished for violating God's command. That's Ibn Ezra pshat. We've mentioned others read it differently. Many commentators say that the tree of knowledge was a fig tree. This is stuff that we covered. They based their assertion on they sewed fig leaves together and made for themselves girdle. However, if this interpretation was correct, the Bible would say, and they sewed leaves of the tree of the knowledge, and not the fig. Many others say that it was a wheat plant. These are midrashim that we covered. So what I want to do now is stop the recording.